Learning a language the lazy way. So basically what I'm going to talk about in this video is not any kind of like cheating or like some secret hack to learn a language in 10 minutes that's often finds its way into kind of YouTube thumbnails. We're basically going to talk about how you can learn a language the most efficient way to kind of not really put in the least effort, but to get the most results from the least effort. So maximum progress for minimum effort is, I think, a better way to put it. So what we're looking to do is basically make maximum progress in our objective, which is to learn a language, by putting in the smallest amount of effort. And the reason this is useful is because whether or not you want to learn a language quickly or learn a language slowly, by doing this and simply doing more of it if you want to, you can make the most efficient progress possible. You can do the highest ROI things, which we'll talk about what that is in a second, and do not that much of them so you don't make as much progress, or you can do a lot of them and make even more progress. Either way, it doesn't make sense to do low ROI tasks. So if you haven't heard of ROI before, we've talked about it on this channel, but it basically means return on investment. So what you get for what you give. And I think a lot of people go about any kind of objective, but also in language learning, not doing high ROI tasks. In any given kind of field, there are a few key tasks that give you the highest return on your investment. In language learning, they would give you the highest kind of, they would help you learn a language faster than other tasks. So we'll talk about what those specific tasks are in a second, but effectively, this kind of picture is, I think, a really good way of looking at it. So here's you. Here is the task or the goal you want to achieve. In this case, it's learning a language. There are a bunch of different methods available, as I'm sure you'd agree. To learn a language, that you can talk to natives, you can do flashcards, you can do, X, Y, and Z. There's a gazillion different things you can do to try and learn a language. But there are a few things, not one, that are better than all the others. And some of the others are a waste of time. Some of the others are just not as good. But there are a few key tasks that are the most beneficial to learning a language. And these are the things you should be investing the majority of your time in because they get you the most results. So now that we understand how this kind of works, it's fairly easy to understand in a picture what actually are the high ROI tasks for language learning and how do we implement more of them to make as much progress as possible. And as this video is titled, learn a language the lazy way, which that's not entirely accurate of a title, but yeah, we'll talk about that. So we're being efficient, not lazy, is what I mean. So to learn a language, we need to identify these high ROI tasks and implement them. So a few examples I've put below are input. If you haven't heard of input versus output before, input is basically reading or listening, as in you're consuming content. Output is producing content, so you're writing or speaking. Basically, we want to be doing all four of these things on screen and doing them the most efficient as possible. So as far as input goes, we want to be reading or listening at basically what's called a comprehensive input level. If you haven't heard of comprehensive input, it's basically the level between you understanding everything and you not understanding everything. So an ideal level would be, if you're reading a book, for example, you don't understand every single word, but you understand enough to get a gist of what's going on. That's a good level to learn at, because if you have no idea, and you don't even know the context, it can be kind of difficult. Whereas if you at least have a rough idea, you can kind of, some words don't even need to translate that you don't know, because you can kind of just understand what they mean and how they fit in to the text, especially if you've read it before in English. So we need to be implementing reading and listening. As far as output goes, we need to practice writing and speaking. We know that, otherwise we're not going to be proficient in the language. Repetition is crucial as well, because at the end of the day, we're trying to get a foreign language into our long-term memory. We need to teach our brain that this information is important. That's how we remember things in our long-term memory. And repetition, flashcards are a great way of doing that. And not just with anything, but I would highly recommend, there's a reason I've colored this word target red. I've colored it red because a lot of people don't do this, and they will pay for it. So as in, not that I'm going to come and get them, but they'll pay for it in that it's sacrificing a lot of their potential progress. So by targeting, I basically mean, if you imagine a language, there's a bunch of different topics within the language, like, colors, numbers, food, etc. We could be here forever. Targeting specific topics within the language over small periods of time is a great way to get them into your brain, because you're kind of, instead of bouncing around between various things, you're actually working on something. You have to kind of do something a few times, obviously, to get it into your memory. And picking a specific topic for like a week, for example, and focusing on consuming content about it, producing content about it, doing flashcards with those kind of words, etc., is a really great way to lock those things into your brain. And it doesn't just have to be words in flashcards as well. It can be grammar, like you might have to, if you don't know what this term means, inflection, I'll explain it in a second, but you might have to inflect a word based on its position in a sentence in a flashcard. Inflection is basically how words change depending on, inflection is how do I say this? How words change depending on context. So for example, in a lot of languages, take Italian, when you're describing something, the adjective, which is the describing word, the ending changes depending on the noun. So we would say, if you wanted to say the tall man in Italian, it would be l'uomo alto. But if you wanted to say the tall woman, it would be la donna alta. That word alto, which means tall, the ending changes from O to A depending on if it's a masculine noun you're describing or a feminine noun you're describing. If that doesn't make sense, you can just Google inflection if you'd like, or YouTube it and watch a full video on it. But that's just an example of a grammatical thing you could have in flashcards. And then the last thing I have here is studying. So a lot of people do studying wrong, where they're kind of wasting their time drawing like pictures, but drawing pictures can actually be great. I'll take that back. But they kind of just do things. They spend way too much time doing things that aren't particularly useful with studying. So the only things that are useful with studying, the point of studying is to basically give yourself a kind of an improved understanding of how the language works so that you can speak it better. So if you're studying is, for example, you're studying a particular grammatical concept, it might be verb conjugation, you want to understand all the endings rather than just rote learn them, which might take forever. You could just, research how the endings of verbs change depending on who's saying them. That could be beneficial, and watching a video on that, taking some notes, covering it, looking at it again, etc. Having that page in your language learning notebook that you can revisit could be really useful for you becoming better. So that would be an example of productive studying. It could also be you're not even taking notes, you might just be watching a video of a native speaker explaining a problem you're having. That's basically studying. We're improving our understanding of the language and patching holes we have here and there. So make sure the takeaway from this video is whatever you are doing, make sure it cleanly fits into one of these things. If you're reading or listening things without actually learning new words or improving, you're kind of wasting your time. Obviously, we can be, we've talked about this before, you can be listening to something passively while you're doing chores, for example. Maybe you're not completely focusing on it, but you are kind of, you have it on in the background, so you're familiarizing yourself with it. Great, that's fine. But just don't be consuming rubbish polyglot content that isn't actually helping you. Don't be like bouncing around between various languages and expecting to make a high level of progress. Don't be, afraid to speak to a native speaker or to record yourself and listen back to it to practice your speaking. Just don't be afraid. Don't waste time, etc. And if you need help with actual specific language learning tasks, you can comment below or check out other videos on my channel. But yeah, that is basically the video, guys. Hopefully that is kind of useful for you. And yeah, if you have any questions, comment down below. I've got a link in the description to my coaching if you want to check it out. And yeah, thank you for watching. Have a good one.